I've got 5 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Just as a note, we are missing our clerk for the night. Jacob, he's on vacation, so we will need to appoint a temporary clerk for this evening. Do I volunteer for that?
I volunteer.
Maggie volunteer for the role of temporary clerk for the night. We'll need a motion and a second.
Got a motion?
I'll take the second.
Cheryl is the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No? Carried. All right, get started. Additions to agenda, nothing new?
None.
They'll need approval for the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Cheryl with the motion to approve the agenda. Bruce with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Same sign, or carried. Public comment, nobody here? On to the consent agenda. So everybody had the opportunity to review the consent agenda, I assume. I have meetings, the minutes from the last meetings in January and February. And bills, just Cheryl, you have?
I had a chance to review the bills. There was nothing outstanding. Everything appeared to be business as usual.
Okay. Few personnel items, we've, new coaching contracts for Jeff Slotsky and Colin Wolf as track coaches, head coaches.
Yeah, so just so the board understands that one, so Chris Wolfel was our head track coach. He had resigned. That's the resignation that's on here. Jeff Sawatsky and Colin Wolf were interested in doing a co-coaching. So basically what we are doing is taking the head coach amount, an assistant coach amount, combining them, splitting it in half. That's what each of them are getting as co-head coach compensation. And then what that means is because Jeff and Colin were both assistant coaches, it means right now there's a vacancy for an assistant track coach that Max is advertising. I believe he actually has a recommended hire ready to go that you'll see next month, and that'll round out our track. Be same number of coaches that we've always had, the same 4 coaches, so.
Do we have any other absences in coaching positions for spring, or we still have softball?
He is still looking for some softball positions. I just actually met with Max last week talking about that. He had a couple of potentials of current employees. So he was gonna be doing some research into that and stuff. So I don't know precisely where softball is at as of, today or anything. But aside from that, I believe that's what it was the track position. Softball.
And leave absence from Ms. Lorenz, and that's it. So
Will we approve consent agenda?
we have a motion from Rick to approve consent agenda,
I'll second.
second from Cheryl. Is there any conversation or anything you'd like to have on this? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say no. Carried. Communication items, Matt?
I just have one, I did update or send everybody the latest communication as far as Minnesota State High School League. The bylaw change that is in front of members right now. So essentially the current board, I believe, board of directors for the State High School League has 20 seats on it. There's a host of ways those are divvied up, all the way from, I know the governor has a seat that's appointed, and then there are specific seats based on different stakeholders in activities. The current bylaw change that is in front of all the members is to permanently place 2 school superintendents onto that board. It wouldn't be the same 2, but they would be 4-year terms, just like all the other board positions. And to start with, one would be a 2-year term and the other one would be a 4-year, so there would always be overlap. So that ballot just arrived, actually, I believe it was yesterday. So just know, board, you will get a copy of that ballot, and then Rick, I will be contacting you since you are Minnesota State High School League rep as far as that's concerned. so.
We as the board need to make a decision on how we're gonna vote on that, or?
And so that's what I'm actually looking into right now, because I don't, it's not clear
Okay.
as to, does it have to be a motion, a second, and a vote of the board, or how that is actually, laid out. As soon as I have clarification on that, that will determine, next steps. But the reality would be is if that is what needs to happen, then we probably are looking at a special meeting in order to do that, because I do know that the ballots close prior to our next business meeting in March. So I'll get more information on it. Board members will see more information at the end of the week as well, and then we'll determine what next steps are.
Do you happen to know, are they going to determine that one is an inner city and one's an outstate?
You know, that makes logical sense, Cheryl, and I would suspect there would be a way that they would probably have a metro rep and an outstate rep. I don't know if they would base it on, school enrollment and have it be one rep from enrollment over X number, whatever that median is, and one with lower. I don't know that specifically, but yeah, it would seem like it would make sense. I think the first thing that needs to happen is if the bylaw passes, then the next step to the process is taking and making the rules that now govern how those seats are selected, is my understanding of it. But more information is coming out as we go, okay? That's all I have. The rest of everything that I have is in the agenda that we'll get to.
Alright. Committee reports. Cindy, have much for committee meetings this last month?
I don't know that we've had any.
There was a continuing ed meeting yesterday that I missed, but. nothing.
And I missed it as well, so I had
You missed the last one too.
I had a-
actually did make the last one, but.
another meeting on, so I wasn't at continuing ed either. I did touch base with Leah from continuing ed this morning, and she said they just approved a lot of clock hours, and then reminded me of which administrative positions have their license to renew too. So I think that was pretty much the what amounted to the agenda.
I think of Stearns County Family Services is tomorrow, so. Yeah. And missing our student representative tonight, so on old business, which we see none. New business. Yeah.
So the revised budget, this is the same budget that you saw at the last work session. There's nothing that is different in this budget. Again, just as a reminder, so this is the revised budget. Every February, the board takes the amount that the auditors have certified when they were here in November, December. And then we take those numbers that the auditors stated we had as assets, and we apply our new student counts that we now know are pretty good estimates of where we're gonna be. And then we apply that to what the auditors had said. So as you can see, our budget, our revised budget has us with about a $395,000 shortfall in our general fund unassigned. The bulk of that is due to lower enrollment than what the budget was created with. We've been talking about that since back in September, so I don't think that's a surprise to anyone sitting at the table right now. This is a snapshot right now of where we believe we will end June 30th and the fiscal year. When June 30th rolls around, this is where we think we will be. The board does need to approve the revised budget. Again, there's not really any changes in this budget. The only thing that's changing is now we are actually applying the actual student enrollment numbers that we have and that we know that we have for the 2021 school year.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised 2021 budget as presented.
I have a motion from Bruce.
Second.
And a second from Rick. Are there any discussions on this? Not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That is carried. 2021-2022 budget update.
So at your places is a continuation of the discussion we had at work session. We left that conversation when we talked about establishing the 21-22 budget to work with a budget that had 910 ADMs. and that we also felt that there's a good likelihood that the state would have a 1% increase in the general education formula. So this is the budget that comes out when you start comparing where we were at 1920, rolling into 2021, and then pushing things forward to 21-22 with similar assumptions. You can see that if we do nothing, right now, the expected deficit next year is going to climb to about $458,000. Obviously, I'm not going to recommend that we do nothing. We should be proactive on this, and I think there are things we can do in order to fix that. What I would recommend that the board set for a budget reduction target this spring would be $500,000. That's what my recommendation would be. That number may be fluid. And the reason I say it may be fluid is because there are things that are still moving that potentially could impact this. Just last week, there was a bill introduced that basically took the declining enrollment clause that is in state statute and applied that to the 1920, recognizing the decline in public school enrollment this year with COVID-19. So there are things like that, that if that money that's allocated runs through that formula, clearly Paynesville is going to get a piece of that money, and that is going to impact potentially where things are sitting. I feel comfortable sitting here today saying that $500,000 is a good target. And then we can use that number to work through this spring and know that as we work through that, we may be coming back and having a similar conversation, and that number might be changing.
I'll make a motion directing the administration to develop a budget reduction target of $500,000.
I have a motion from Bruce. I will be the second. Honestly, the second. Is there any discussion on this?
So once you can come back with that plan, then there's further discussion about that, or?
Yeah, I mean, so the next step in this is going to be, number one, I'm gonna share this target with all employees. And so there will be an opportunity for everybody. If there are solutions, if there are efficiencies that can be gained places, we certainly are open to any of those ideas that are out there. The administrative team has started working already, knowing that there was going to be a shortfall, just because of the fact that we were down students, that clearly this isn't a surprise as to where we're at. So there are some things that are already being compiled that are possibilities. And I think the thing that everybody needs to understand is the goal of the entire process is to hold student programming harmless. So the goal is to be able to come up with reduction tools that doesn't eliminate student programs. I think that also means it's fair game to look at delivering services differently. That may increase efficiencies, that we may be able to change how we do business in order to be able to do things more efficiently. But yeah, it'll be a continued process, and I would suspect, sitting here today in February, I would suspect the March work session will be a topic of budget, and I would suspect April work session again the budget will be on there, and so the board will be able to kind of see where things are going in real time, so to speak. Goal then, by statute, the board has to have a budget approved by June 30th of every calendar year.
Like you said, that's fluid and can change if legislation passes that we can go off of different enrollment numbers.
Correct.
Because I mean, to me, 500,000 is a lot, and I really feel like we run pretty efficiently and lean. But I know there's probably attrition and different things too to take into consideration.
No, $500,000 is significant.
It's a pretty big.
Yep, it is significant.
Our toughest thing is gotta report it to the state,
Right,
and we don't know.
right.
If the state doesn't, the legislature does everything in the last minute. I mean, they always talk about how they're gonna get it out early. Well, sometimes it's so tight, but the only thing Matt has to work with is where we're at. We just have no choices.
Right.
My personal feeling is, it'll be a conversation piece all the way through July and going forward, because the part of that's being fluid is going to start when we find out where our enrollment is. If there's things that can change,
And then,
but
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I appreciate the conversations that are happening with BDE about like cost saving and positions and things like that. I think we'll continue to do that regardless if there's budget issues or not. I think that's how we should operate, but still that 500,000 is, and we knew these numbers were coming, it just still is
Yes.
a lot.
we're part of the bigger problem. You had in here a letter from the governor. Well, if there's 17,000 people that are no longer in the system, times
Right.
$10,169 is $172 million. Well, that's our portion of the 172. That's my
Well,
interpretation.
and
I don't know what you do about it.
and that's a lot of the conversation that right now is going on at the Capitol. Clearly, I think there were people that were expecting the state budget and the February forecast, and everything is, they were expecting it to be maybe a little more gloomy than it was. And so there is some conversation down there about, okay, well, let's just remember a portion of this is that money that we were expecting to send out to public schools that we aren't because enrollment is down. Now, there's also many sides to that conversation and everything. And so, but that conversation is going on. Now, whether that picks up any steam and traction is, kind of yet to be determined, but I know that there are people that are trying to have that conversation right now.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Carried. Strategic plan 2021.
Right, so, I believe I had emailed this out to everybody, but I thought I sent it out to everybody after our work session. I know I was supposed to. So here's, essentially what, the modifications were after the discussion at the last, work session. And I guess the question is really, it's kind of up to this body as far as, do we move forward with approving this as our plan? Or, are there other things that need to be, do we have to circle back and do some other things before you guys are comfortable with it?
Personally, I'm at a point where we approve it and we move forward at this point. There's nothing in here that is rock solid. That's how a plan's supposed to be. When we talk about being fluid, that's what this should be. We could be 4 months on the road and figure that we need to shift and move a little bit, but I think it's a great document to get us started.
And that's the purpose of this too, Bruce, because now moving forward, once this is approved, every month at the business meeting, this will be old business and the board is going to interact with the plan every month. So it is gonna have a fluidity to it and, all best laid plans today might not necessarily work out that way and we may veer left or right or whatever, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay.
So if we look at this each month,
Yep.
will there be a set schedule that we'll want to keep going through, or will it be just general, or?
So, I think, Rick, the answer to that is, what do you guys want to see
Yeah.
each month?
Okay.
The process that I have done in the past has been red light, yellow light, green light. And I will have a spreadsheet now that will just have those essential, there'll be 3 columns on it, red, yellow, and green, with the green being, these are the action items that we are moving forward with and they are in implementation phase. Yellow might be more about, we're in research phase as far as finalizing, what are we gonna implement? And red is, hey, this is on our radar. Probably isn't quite to research phase yet, but just know this is stuff that's gonna be coming up and where we're moving in the future. Every item that goes on that list is gonna be tied back to a goal and a benchmark or a short-term objective is essentially how it would work. So from that, then I think the board will be able to have conversation and some, contextual discussion about, hey, it looks like we really aren't doing much with our communication goal. So Matt, let's not let this fall off the front burner. This has to stay front burner. So that's really kind of how I see it working. But again, the question's gonna go back to you. How do you want to interact with it on a monthly basis? We can try red light, yellow light, green light for a few months. And if people feel like that's working, great. If we need to modify it, we can certainly do that.
I guess that's kind of how I envisioned us working from it. I mean, in previous discussions you've had, and then just as well as, you know, looking over this document and it's being developed, understanding that's kind of how I thought we would interact with it, towards that same direction. And again, it's a fluid document, it's a fluid, piece of information for us to work from as a board and as a district. And, I agree. I think this is kind of at a good spot for us to, let's.
I guess my concern was we didn't get bogged down in one area all the time, but we were able to really make sure we're touching all the bases.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting too, as we look at what the budget recommendation is gonna be, how that then fits into the strategic plan. Like, it should help guide those decisions, because we've said these are the goals, and we should be looking at balance within that. So it'll be a good tool to
Make those
try.
conversations, I think, a lot more concrete.
Right.
When you have that
Correct.
as, this is our guiding document.
Definition.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think having the benchmarks in there will be helpful too, to know,
Yep.
you know, because eventually a lot of things should be green, right? They're in
Yes.
progress, and then we need to see like, yeah, how are we tracking within that?
Yes.
I think it's great.
So looking for a motion to approve the strategic plan.
So moved.
I'll second.
Rick with the motion. We have Bruce with the second. Now, we just had some discussion, but is there any further discussion regarding the strategic plan? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That's carried. Learning model action.
So February 17th, we had our consultation with representatives from the Department of Health and Department of Education. Interestingly, I think we might have been one of the last districts to have a consultation, because as we were in the middle of ours, they were making, everybody on the other end of the call was getting notification of a new department meeting that they needed to attend, and I think shortly thereafter, they switched up their model a little bit. Our consult went very well. The folks from MDE and MDH were both in agreement that yes, what we are planning and striving for is exactly the guidance that public health is trying to have schools embed as part of their mitigation strategies. There were no concerns. The big question that I had was about the roll-in, going from hybrid to all in person. Did we have to do grade level bands, or could we just bring everybody back? They answered that as no, once you're in hybrid, you can absolutely bring everybody back to full in person. And then we talked a little bit about transportation. Because once we do become full in person, if we have to live by the 50% capacity rule on our school buses, which is what we're held to when we're in hybrid learning, that is very difficult for us, particularly when you factor in the number of kids that are being dropped off in town and out of town. It almost creates a situation where we have to do a in-town run and then come back to school and get the country kids. So that went well. They assured the district that no, full in-person, still have seating charts on your buses, spread kids out as best you can, but they understand that there is no requirement to have 50% capacity on school buses if you are full in-person. The last thing that we really spent time talking about is they just wanted to see the local data. So I had provided local data for them, and they were very happy with the local data that we are collecting and keeping and tracking, and felt very comfortable that we are doing our due diligence and making sure that we're tracking any potential cases or outbreaks and stuff. So things went very well, and they were on board with the plan to return to in-person full-time Monday through Friday school, March 8th.
Can you talk a little bit more about for future, so our numbers, I mean, we're not seeing outbreaks necessarily happen, so it sounds like we are gonna be given more control kind of within our school district, not necessarily Paynesville, Stearns County. Like, what is that gonna look like?
Yeah, so, and I think if MDH and MDE could redo any of how this all rolled out, they probably would have approached the whole grid and cases per 10,000 differently, because that really clearly turned into, this is the matrix that you have to follow. And it's very clear at this point that that's not the case. What MDH and MDE are really pushing to school districts is, we wanna see that you have quality case data, and that you have the capacity to do contact tracing and you're doing those things. And that's really what is gonna guide future decisions. You know, if we get everybody back in person and then all of a sudden we've got an outbreak of, 7, 8, 9, 10 cases, the reality is I don't know how long we'll be able to stay in person. But that's really what MD and MDH is looking for, is they wanna see local district data first. Then they'll go and say, okay, and how does that fit into the bigger picture of Stearns, Candy, Ojai, and Meeker is kind of how they're approaching it.
My question was on the quarantine. So we have people that have gone to work to get vaccinated. They're getting the second one, and then we talked about 90 days. Where did that come from? I haven't read that anywhere.
Yeah, so that's a CDC, I believe it started as a CDC recommendation. MDH has now issued to all schools and school nurses that if somebody is vaccinated from the date of their second dose of vaccine for 90 days, they do not need to quarantine if they are identified as a close contact, as long as they are not demonstrating any symptoms. Now, the way it was explained to a group of superintendents, I think that 90-day piece is just there to get things going. What they're really wanting to do is collect data on people that are vaccinated. Are they potentially demonstrating the potential to spread COVID-19? And are they potentially a carrier of COVID-19? So I think as there's more data that comes in that they can try and, I was just reading something over the weekend that was really promising in the literature about how that vaccinated people really aren't looking to be carriers of COVID-19. And I think if that literature keeps coming in, I could very easily see that before this 90-day guidance expires, that they could be modifying or changing that here in the next month or so, or a month and a half.
Yeah, because we certainly, I hope we don't have to go back through the whole vaccinating process before school starts again.
Right.
That would be ridiculous from every bit of data that I've read.
Right.
It makes sense. I was just curious. That just was the one thing that stuck out.
And it's interesting because as an employer, I mean, it's a very fine line too with requesting vaccination records. I have no desire to all of a sudden keep a database of who's been vaccinated. So it is really gonna be up, at least from us as an employer, it's gonna be up to employees to volunteer that information. If somebody just says, you know what, it's none of your business whether I was vaccinated or not, fine, that's okay. Then just know, then you're gonna have to quarantine for 14 days. But if they want to, share that they've been vaccinated or share their vaccination record, then they could forgo the quarantine period for that 90 days after their date of their second dose.
So another question, sorry, about like some of the decisions, like with like some of the, especially like high school programming, so prom and commencement, I know that still weighs out. Like what is, you may not know, but is there a timeline, like decisions will be made a few weeks before that? How does the administration team?
Yeah, so we're working on that.
Trying to figure that out.
Right now. Tomorrow is our administrative team meeting, and things that are on there are commencement, our prom, our rental of our facility is on there. So all of those things, that are kind of tied to, we haven't had a lot going on in buildings. Realistically, and this is only my opinion, and I reserve the right to change it, but I think the first prudent step is let's get everybody back on March 8th. Then let's take and finish out third quarter. And then let's look at fourth quarter, opening things up to, say, some field trips. Say, some rental of facilities for some outside groups. We could talk about then, what does commencement look like? What is prom gonna look like? Those type of things, but I think if anybody has the expectation that on March 8th, because we're back in person, everything's just business as usual, that's probably not the way that it'll play out. But I think if we can get everybody back, if we can be assured that, everybody's back and we're still having a healthy staff and a healthy student body, then I think realistically, fourth quarter
Okay,
is where we can start rolling those things back in.
no, that makes sense.
All right, so
And then just the last item, sorry, but the mitigation strategies are gonna stay the same. So both schools will social distance as much as we possibly can. 3-foot social distancing is what's required in person now. We will try to have more than 3-foot social distancing whenever possible, but there will just be times during the day that won't be possible. Obviously, face masks or face shields are required. Families still have the option that if they aren't comfortable with in-person, they still have the option to go to full-time remote as well. That's a possibility as well.
If the kiddos are in full remote, can they at that point still participate in extracurriculars?
Extracurricular activities, yes, they can. Where we're running into some things, and this is a conversation that we're gonna have more, as well as, right now, if students are in full remote, we are not having them, participate in any, off-campus class activities. So for instance, like elementary students are up using the ice rink, this week for PE class. Full remote kids are not coming up to the ice rink to participate in that.
Or field trips or that type of
And
thing?
right now, we don't have any field trips going.
No, but if they're,
And so that's gonna be the conversation is, what does that look like once we get back to full in-person? Then what does that look like, for that full remote? But I think, sitting here today, I would be willing, I'm thinking that if you're in full remote, it probably would be the same. Rather than a field trip, we would provide an alternative activity for remote students.
all right, so looking for a motion to approve the information.
Can I just ask, have we been, and maybe we haven't officially changed learning models, but have we been voting on learning model changes as a board? Or did we give you permission to change?
So your opening resolution back in August
Yeah.
gave me the ability to do that. I did think there was some level of importance to have this board
Approve the,
weigh in on going back to full in-person. Up to this point, we have essentially we started in person and then we went to hybrid, and we have been in hybrid ever since right around November 10th, I want to say is about the day that we made that switch. So since November, we've been in some form of hybrid. Some of that was 2 days a week, some of it 3 days, some of it 4 days, but it's always been a hybrid learning model.
But as a board, we didn't address it. This is the first time since August.
Since you guys in August selected the in-person.
That's what I thought, I was just making sure.
Yep.
Well, perspective will be, it's a pretty big step.
yeah,
I mean, we're all coming out of fear and everything else that's going with this thing. I think it's probably not the wisest thing to have it rest on one person's shoulders.
I agree.
I'll make that a motion
I'll second.
that we approve the implementation of
So
it.
a motion from Rick and a second from Maggie. Got our discussion, anything else you'd like to bring up? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. That's carried. naming a facility.
So this one, you know, I guess what is the wish of the board? We did visit about this at our last admin meeting. The consensus at the admin meeting was to, call the addition the PAC. That would stand for Paynesville Area Community Center. I know that there's some concern about having a community center, another community center. I don't believe necessarily that people are going to be saying the Paynesville Area Community Center. I think we'll just be referring to it as the PAC. There's some sample logos on there. Just for what it's worth, those are just a couple that people have been messing around with. I don't know that anything is set as far as what a logo is gonna look like or anything. But board discussion as far as what you would like to name that space.
I think it looks good personally. I just don't like the THE.
Okay?
Just, this afternoon, I just kinda jumped into St. John's, St. Cloud State, University of Minnesota. There's nothing there they have is the John Doe Center or the,
Yep.
does that make sense?
Especially when it comes to a logo or
Yeah.
a show that way. It might be still referred to as the PAC, cause you.
Oh, yeah, that would
put
be in your
the-
natural, in your
yeah,
language, that would be,
yeah,
but not in the title.
I like logo 3 and remove the,
Move up.
I like logo 3, the bigger
That
bulldog.
was one I didn't like.
That's what you didn't like?
I thought the bulldog was too big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did too.
I do agree, moving the is like, you don't say the target,
Yeah. it's just-
but in your literature, you can reference small t, the
Yep.
back, yeah.
I don't like acronyms in the first place, but, PACC, we're going to tell people to go to the PAC Center. So it's Paynesville Area Community Center.
I would just say go the PAC.
Or the PAC gym, or
Yeah.
the PAC auditorium, or the PAC whatever.
Field house,
Yeah,
Well, I think, like they were talking about last time, is then you would say like
PAC
PAC
will
court
be-
12, PAC court, it would, everything would in the.
PAC would refer to the field house.
Right, and so then you would be able to reference which, court, which,
Court.
you know, which room.
So I
Wasn't it
think
everything
this-
was, or everything, including the CTE space, was it everything that direction would be labeled PAC?
Yes.
So I come to the board and we have this all over the place. WAY and da-da-da. And never said what it was. I mean, it felt stupid because I didn't know. I think some of this is going to be for us and the system and some of that. But somebody asked me where it is, I'm gonna say it's Paynesville Community Center. Or Paynesville Area Community Center. I think it'll be the same thing. I'm not sure the whole public's gonna pick it up as the PAC. That'll be more,
People will call it what they call it. They'll
yeah,
probably call that big building the field house, no matter what. I just, well, it's a field house.
yeah.
Field house.
they may. I think it's kinda cool actually, to have the PAC on there, eliminates it, you can tell bus drivers, all that. I'm not sure the public's, they'll probably just stick with either the field house or the Paynesville Area Community Center.
Or the fitness center or what, you know.
Yeah.
The big gym next to the school.
Yeah.
Right, you'll run into
The
that.
school field house, the school gym,
Yeah.
they're gonna call it what they're gonna
The
call it.
hope is though, if this is what it's branded, that we would use it.
Yes.
The point is we wanna eliminate the confusion.
And
We don't
whoever-
wanna say community center like everything else, so I would think the hope would be, if this is adopted, then that's what.
Yeah,
we
and
call
I
it.
think that's the
People
other
catch on
thing
as-
is, community ed will really drive a
They'll-
lot of
yeah.
that conversation, because that's how
They'll refer to.
they'll
Right.
refer to it in registrations. That's how when you.
And the
sign
kids
up-
will hear it in
when you
school.
sign
they'll
up for
call it
adult
the PAC.
volleyball league, that's, you're gonna learn where PAC court 1 is and PAC court 4 is. So, yeah.
Yeah, the kids start calling it that, their parents eventually will, and grandparents.
and whoever said number 3, is that you, Thomas?
Yeah.
That's my favorite too, cause it's coming out, I mean, that's just a popular way to do logos right now with it coming out of the
With it coming out of. the-
circle.
Yeah.
I didn't like the either because the kerning's all wrong and you don't need it there, but if you just put PAC underneath it and because people are visual and that big old logo is, and then the PAC will also burn in your memory
Yep.
with it. And that's how you start associating it and calling it.
Yep.
Whatever, my opinion.
We're not voting necessarily on a logo tonight, but just naming the.
No, and those logos were there just more
Just
for, just for samples. And if somebody wants to take a shot at doing a different logo, by all means.
Make it a contest.
We're open.
Now, how about the big, logos on the end of the building? What do you think of there?
I will send you guys the renderings. I do have some renderings from Lewis Industry on it, so let me send those. I'll
Yeah, cause
send
there
those out.
should be some
Yeah, so,
continuity.
yep, so essentially, it's a very similar bulldog as to what's in those logos. And at the top of it, and so I'm talking about what's on that west brick facade there. It will say, Paynesville Area Schools on the top, and then Home of the Bulldogs underneath with the Bulldog logo. So there's nothing on that actual sign that says Paynesville Area Community Center, anything like that. That is more just school district Bulldog signage. But I can send those out. Logan had sent over a sample as far as what they were working on. I asked him to make a couple of different modifications to it. I haven't seen the update since that went back to him, but I can send those to you and you can take a look at those. It would be backlit and, between the stainless steel, that would be the sign, would be, Bulldog green plexiglass. And so it would be backlit with, everything would be, that green lettering is what would be behind it.
Well, whatever that is, that's what everybody's gonna see.
Exactly.
That's not here. They're not gonna see half of the rest of this other than on the community things and.
Yeah, but and you're right, I think the folks that are actually using it and needing to locate things in that place, they're gonna know where Pack Court 1, Pack Court 2. People that are driving by on Old 23, they're gonna see that, oh, there's the school, high school, and they're the Bulldogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look to make a motion, to name the facility the PAC, or just say PAC.
Pack.
And I'll make that motion,
I'll second.
and Maggie with a second. Any further discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Carried. Click off this. Click off this here. Online learning provider information.
So, in preparing for next year, one of the things that I think is important is that Paynesville area schools position themselves to be able to provide online instruction. Right now, we have obviously a lot of flexibility with hybrid model, remote learning. All of that flexibility is due to executive orders that have been issued, and that's why we can operate in those modes. I'm a little nervous as to what that means once we get out of that mode of operation, because I do think we have had students that have been extremely successful in remote learning environments. And I think it's important for us to be able to offer a whole spectrum of services that students and families can be able to work with to determine what actually works best for their child and their child's education. So with that, I've just provided materials so that the board's aware. This isn't action in any way. I have proposed that the 4 members of West Central Ed School District or West Central Ed District, so Sauk Center, Melrose, Albany, and Paynesville, get together and submit a joint application to become a certified online learning provider. I think there's interest in the other districts, and they've all expressed that, yes, they want to at least be part of the conversation. I don't know necessarily that it's gonna be a joint application. At the minimum, I think Paynesville needs to move forward, that if West Central Ed isn't interested in becoming an online option, then I think Paynesville needs to go and do this individually. I did inquire with MDE, thinking potentially, if things don't work out with the 4 West Central Ed districts, could we potentially look for some other partners that geographically make sense for us? And MDE in my conversation so far, they're really focused on a joint application, or what they call a collaborative application, needs to have a joint powers agreement. So obviously West Central Ed has a joint powers agreement, and that makes a lot of sense. So that kind of limits our conversation about potentially doing something with just some other local districts. So at this point, it's just information, but no, it's gonna come back. I know I'm gonna move forward with submitting an application at some point, and I just want board members to be aware of it. Ashley, did you have a question?
Well, maybe I just need to read number one more clearly, but to be an online public school provider, do you need a separate curriculum? You can do your same curriculum, but like, explain to me how this works.
Yeah, so right now, under current statute, so when we get back to operating without executive orders, any school district in the state of Minnesota can provide online learning opportunities for their own students, provided that it's on part-time basis only. So as long as we could open up an option where a student could come and say they could take a class at our high school, 1 block out of 4, the rest of their day they could be online. But right now, they need to have some sort of participation physically in the building. And where these state-approved online providers, that requirement goes away.
Okay.
You can deliver 100% online instruction and have no physical building where kids actually have to come for any portion of their day. That is the biggest difference between what we can do under current state law and what being an approved online provider would open up for us.
But then the schools I know that do that right now, because they have that already, they do the same curriculum, but they don't have the same teachers. They have a separate few teachers that do all of the online part. So is that what we're looking towards, or like what we've been doing, just?
So, and this is why I would really like to see the West Central Ed District be a partner in this. Because what I would like to be able to do is let's, as Paynesville, let's take our rock stars of online teachers that have really hit it out of the park with online teaching. You know, maybe we've got 4 or 5 teachers that have just done an exceptional job. Well, Albany's got 4 or 5, Melrose has got 4 or 5, Sauk's got 4 or 5. Now, all of a sudden, rather than looking at those 4 or 5 as delivering high-quality program, now we've got 20 to 25 teachers in the pool. And so then I think middle school and high school principals could really go through with that talent pool and put together a really legitimate offering that could be for sure grades 6 through 12. I think there needs to be more discussion about what upper elementary looks like, and a lot of discussion about what primary elementary looks like, if we want to go that far. But so in my mind, that's how I've been thinking about
Would you
it.
take teachers out of the classroom to do this, or is this something
I think,
part of their?
I think it could be either way.
Okay.
I think you could do it where maybe a full-time teacher at Paynesville, for instance, teaches 6 blocks. Maybe that, 3 each semester. Maybe one of our full-time teachers teaches 1 block in this first semester, and then they have 2 blocks in person, and then second semester, all 3 are in person. So 1 out of their 6 blocks is dedicated to this online provider. It could be that way. It could be where you actually are to a point where you have such stable enrollment here that you have a 100% predictable funding stream, that you could go and actually hire personnel to fit within the funding stream that you're bringing in from this. Because the other piece to, once you are an online provider, an approved online provider, you can actually offer courses to any student in the state.
That's, how does that work with enrollment? How do you foresee as more school districts look to apply for this, that affecting enrollment, rural education as well as, you know?
It'll be interesting to see how many actually go here. My conversations with people down at MDE is I think they have 25 to 35 applications that they're expecting this year. It sounded like the vast majority of them were metropolitan school districts or large outstates. So your Duluth, Rochester, St. Cloud's, Austin, things like that. So I think that's really where it'll get interesting is, do you see a system that only has 1,000 kids or only has 1,500 kids? Do you see those systems put in for an application? I think it'd be really hard to do a standalone application for a system that size.
Yeah.
Pool our resources with West Central Ed, now you've got 5,600 kids. I think that's a system that you could absolutely.
But do you see there being competition in direct Paynesville enrollment where the student is now attending a St. Cloud school versus Paynesville?
If we're not willing to be a player in this,
Yeah, or even if we are, like, just in general, do you see us really messing with enrollment throughout the state?
no, well, I think the big thing, the bonus for us is if we have a family who's interested in doing an online provider, we can just offer them this one. We still get all the state aid.
Correct.
So we get all the state aid, let's say a student here wanted to take a class in Edina because they offered some specialty class. Then we're still a Paynesville enrolled student taking a class through.
No.
But they're now enrolling in Edina.
Yeah.
So that's a part where I think then if we're doing it with our West Central Ed district, we would at least have potentially that many more classes.
Right.
That students could take, and it would still be part of our application
Right.
or enrollment.
Yeah, and so then West Central Ed is gonna take that
Right.
state aid, and then they're gonna go and calculate out, okay, this is how many kids Paynesville had, and they're just gonna turn around and send the state aid to us.
Right.
So West Central Ed is really just the flow-through body for the dollars.
But if I am in Paynesville district and I enroll online with West Central Ed, I still can graduate with my Paynesville peers.
Correct,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep,
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'm glad we're looking at this, like,
Yeah.
the world is changing, I mean, I think it's harder for adults to go, how could a student do this at home? Jobs are changing where they're working from home, like, this is gonna be the new norm.
the only thing that I will be adamant on as we go down this road is we need our teachers to be part of this.
Yes,
I am not in any way in favor of, let's do this, and then let's go buy a software program that we can just have somebody oversee, and then they'll just, when Thomas finishes class 1, they'll just assign him class 2, and he's just gonna work through these computer modules.
Right.
That is not something that I guess I have a lot.
but if we're looking at our strategic plan, that wouldn't happen, right?
Correct.
Because this will enable us to serve more students.
Correct.
And a more personalized experience, which hopefully then,
Correct.
but then, yeah, how do you get,
And there's so many other questions that if we can get this moving, things like questions right now that West Central Ed is wondering about, like credit recovery, how do we do that in all of our districts? Probably goes away, because now we have a backbone in place for credit recovery to be supported by something like this. Not to say that every kid would have to do credit recovery through online learning, but there would be that common program, that common backbone that would be able to support the addition of credit recovery pieces, so. Conversation is in its infancy. I believe, the West Central Ed Soups are gonna meet the first week of March.
when is the application due? And
There isn't an application, they have rolling application dates, it's
Okay.
just from the date you submit it. MDE
Okay.
gets 90 calendar days to give you feedback on it.
Okay.
So I do think we need to really be looking at that mid-April to maybe very late April as a submission date, in order to be able to plan accordingly.
Even if we apply for it, if we decide after the application is even in, that we decide that it's not going to work for us, it could still be withdrawn.
Yeah, there's nothing that holds us to it. Just because we would have an approved application doesn't mean we are committed to implementation. But we can't be committed to implementation unless we have an approved application.
It makes sense to go forward with it. You can always change your mind before
Absolutely.
You know,
it's
there's.
implemented. I'd move.
Do we have a sense, like from our own student body, what their appetite is for this? Like, is that something to maybe consider as doing?
So we've not polled the question directly, and I know we have to adjourn at 6 o'clock. We're getting close, but we've not polled that question directly, but what we can poll is our junior and senior data of students that are already taking online courses. I think that is telling as far as what kind of a interest level we would have with something like this. But we have not specifically surveyed students and asked that.
Or to maybe have a focus group with the students who are to hear?
Sure.
Yeah.
Will this be on our next meeting agenda?
This actually probably, it's gonna come to a work session. I just don't know exactly when, because there's 3 other districts that are gonna be involved in this.
Yep.
And so you're gonna keep getting an update, but before actually submitting an application, if we go through the West Central Ed, you guys, everybody in the joint powers is gonna have to approve or sign off on the application, so you
I just
guys.
think it's for discussion.
Yep.
In a couple weeks, to.
Yep.
You know, on that. Upcoming meetings.
So tomorrow we have Stearns County Family Services Collaborative. Interestingly, as I was sitting here, they have a joint powers agreement. And it's all 10 school districts in Stearns County.
Oh.
Food for thought for application for online provider.
There you go.
Just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yep.
Monday, March 1 is policy committee. Policy committee members look for materials coming out on Friday for that. Tuesday, March 9th is the work session. And then Tuesday.
5 o'clock meeting too?
Yes, thank you. Tuesday, March 9th is also 5 o'clock, so we have to adjourn that one by 6 o'clock as well. And then Tuesday, the 23rd is our business meeting, and that'll be back to 6 p.m.
With that, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Chair will make a motion to adjourn. I'll make the second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Carried.